The Story of Capcom, 1980s, the decade of magic, the early years of Capcom. The 1980s was a revolutionary era for the gaming industry, and Capcom was at the forefront of this movement. The company was founded by Kenzo Sugimoto in June 1983, and the debut of their first arcade game, Vulgus, marked the birth of a now legendary company. Vulgus was the first development of its kind in Japan, and the start of Capcom's now iconic run of classing arcades and console games. However, up until this time, Capcom was still a small-scale operation which operated under the name IRM Corporation. The company was initially created in May 1981 and focused on the creation of design, concept, and board game material. It was not until after the creation of Vulgus that Capcom shifted their focus to video gaming. After the success of Vulgus, Capcom continued to define the 80s gaming scene with some of its most iconic arcade titles. In 1984, the company released the third-person shooter game, 1942, which was a huge commercial success and the first to introduce the now famous Nintendo Hard difficulty. 1984 was also the year that saw the release of Ghosts and Goblins, Commando, and their iconic platformer, Mega Man. Capcom's domination of arcades continued into 1985. In February, they released the first in their long line of beat-em-up games, Section Z and Trojan. Both games were revolutionary in the way that they featured side-scrolling elements which had not been seen before. Additionally, 1985 saw the beginnings of the Mega Man series, and later the release of Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3, as well as the first in their now legendary fighting game series, Street Fighter. The late 80s was a period of transition for Capcom as the company shifted its focus to home consoles for the first time. In 1988, the same year that the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, was released in North America, Capcom also released their first game for the console. They followed this up in 1989 with their first in the Ghosts and Goblins series. 1943, The Battle of Midway was an arcade shoot-'em-up game and was one of the first games to be released on the console. The arrival of home consoles, 1988-1989. This era also saw the origins of some of Capcom's most iconic franchises and characters, with the release of DuckTales, 1989, and the first 3 games in the Strider series, 1987-1989. Strider Hiryu also became one of the first characters to be featured in another fighting game, with his cameo debut in Street Fighter 2010, The Final Fight, 1989. The 1980s was a revolutionary decade for the gaming industry, and it was an era of immense innovation for Capcom. The company released some of their most popular and genre-defining games of all time, and it marked the beginning of their domination in the gaming world. Despite their relatively small team, they had a massive impact on the industry, and they continued to break the norms of gaming with their innovative titles. Although the beginning of their journey was filled with mixed fortunes, Capcom's successes in the 80s paved the way for their upcoming years, and it allowed them to define the global gaming scene for many years to come. The 1990s, the emergence of Street Fighter and Mega Man. The Street Fighter series is one of Capcom's biggest franchises to date. Its beginning can be traced all the way back to 1987, when the original Street Fighter was released by Capcom in arcades. It's often said that the game revolutionized the fighting game genre, as it brought together several different martial arts and special moves, and a 2-player competitive mode in the arcades. Though it was difficult to control, the game's unique concept inspired many future fighting titles and created what is now known as the fighting game genre. The success of the original Street Fighter led to multiple sequels, including the 1991 hit Street Fighter II. This game featured faster gameplay and improved visuals, which made it both easier to play and visually appealing. Street Fighter II introduced a list of famous characters, such as Ryu, Ken, and E. Honda, as well as popular power-up moves, like Ryu's signature projectile, the Hadoken. In an effort to reach even more fans, the game was ported for several home consoles in 1992. Mega Man, otherwise known as Rockman in Japan, is probably the second most popular franchise from Capcom. The series began back in 1987 with the release of the original 8-bit NES game known as Mega Man. The game featured the titular protagonist, Rockman, as he battled evil robotic enemies in an effort to save the world. The game was almost immediately a hit due to its unique platforming element and wide range of robotic enemies. After its success, the series spawned to become even bigger with the release of Mega Man 2 in 1988. It also introduced Rush, Rockman's robotic dog sidekick, and opened up the series to a larger audience. Mega Man 2 featured improved graphics, more creative levels and weapons, and a more adventurous story, further developing the background of the series. The franchise has since expanded exponentially, with the release of many sequels, spin-offs, crossover titles, and a cartoon series. To this day, Capcom continues to develop new titles for the series, such as the upcoming Mega Man 11 for the Nintendo Switch.